It's that time of year, the annual draft ditties from my co-host, Matt Williamson. Draft notes on every team in the NFL historically as it pertains to the NFL draft. And we will start with the AFC on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Get those mailbag questions in for this week's PW mailbag to those Twitter handles. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more with FanDuel.com/locked on today to get started. Here we go. Draft ditties. I love it every single year. For those new listeners to Peacock and Williamson, Matt, do you want to let the folks know what this is with the annual draft ditties from Matt Williamson?
Yeah, there's a draft publication that asks me to write all the team needs for them. Fran Duffy does all the scouting reports, and I do the team needs. And part of them is, hey, give us 2 sentences on like draft trends of each team. And they call it their draft ditty. So what I do is I go to drafthistory.com, pull up each team one by one, and basically stare at their drafts until something jumps out at me. You know, like, oh, wow, there's a trend here. And the other thing I do, don't tell anybody, but I pull up last year's file of Draft Ditty 2022 and say, wow, maybe I can steal off last year's homework too, because these trends are keeping up. And they often are, because teams have trends.
Well, with that, Matt, let's get started.
Let's dig in, yeah.
AFC draft ditties, which start with AFC East and the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, since drafting Josh Allen in the first round, that was 2018. That wasn't 2 days ago. Every Bills first rounder has been used on defense. And if you include that Allen selection, 7 of their last 8 years have been on defense, with the only exception being Allen. So this was a little more prominent early in his career, but it was absolutely by design. And I think it's something other teams can learn off of too, is if you looked at like Josh Allen in year 2, year 3, everyone around him on offense were veterans from other teams. Stephon Diggs. Remember that offensive line year where they brought in like 7 offensive linemen, Mitch Morse and guys like that, and they drafted defense. Well, I think that's kind of smart for a young quarterback. Let's get him a bunch of veterans. He can kind of ease into things, and we'll draft defense.
With the one exception being the first rounder they didn't spend, but they did send to Minnesota
Diggs,
for Stephon Diggs, which was a nice move there. But I wonder if the Bills I like the philosophy. I think, you know, they were able to build around their quarterback, and then they also tried to draft and develop a defense.
Might have been a bit extreme, though.
Did they force the defense too much? And not so much that there was too many picks on defense, but that maybe there was better players on the offensive side of the ball, because a lot of the defensive picks, now looking back, while fine players, haven't been extremely impactful players.
I agree. You know, and there's definitely hindsight there, but they kept drafting all those defensive linemen, Rousseau and Oliver, and then they went out and signed Von Miller, and you know, like that D line should be better with those that sort of investments.
Yes.
And now looking at it, those veterans on offense have kind of gotten old, and Gabe Davis isn't good enough, or you know, Singletary or Cook, or you know, like they could use an influx of weaponry and linemen.
How about those Miami Dolphins? What kind of trends are you seeing over the course of the last few seasons with their draft classes?
I think this is a massively transitional year for the Dolphins, and in that I referenced that, you know, the offseason resources. Nobody has fewer offseason resources than the Dolphins when you look at draft, cap space, ability to make more cap space. So they're kind of done being buyers, and now's the time that they need to step up, because over the 2020 and 2021 drafts, Miami made 18 total selections in those 2 drafts, including 5 first-round picks. Last year, though, they didn't make their first pick till 102 overall, and they don't have a first-round pick this year. So they're going into the desert in terms of draft pick times.
Yeah, strange draft season for the Dolphins, who had 2 first-round picks at one point, got one taken away and forfeited from the league, and then traded the other one away at the deadline to try to really do some damage in the playoffs, which they weren't able to do, and now they have no first-round picks.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, remember they were tanking for Tua, and they were a bad team there for a while, and Flores gets fired, and he's saying they wanted me to lose. Well, they had 5 first-round picks. I mean, they kind of accomplished that, but now everything went into Chubb and Tyreek.
New England Patriots draft trend. I'll throw one in here. They've been drafting poorly for a while now.
Really poorly. and this reiterates that a little bit. So they've made 5 first-round selections since 2018, all on offensive players. Is there a less talented offense in the league?
And the free agent money. They went out and signed multiple wide receivers, multiple tight ends, and they're still not good anywhere on offense, really. I guess running back, they're fine.
I say Ramondre Stevenson's their best guy, I think. Right. He's a 3rd-round pick.
They need help on the offensive line. They need help at receiver still. Neither tight end is a standout that they spent money on or draft. Remember, they had the year where they drafted 2 tight ends as well. Then they signed 2 more the next year. None of them are really great.
None of them are really great. I mean, who's the difference maker? You use 5 first-round picks in a row on offense. Who's the difference maker?
And the latest report is that their first-round quarterback might not be better than the guy they drafted in the 5th round the next year, and they might be dangling him in trade.
Yeah, right. And you're firing offensive coordinators, and after having 2 of them last year.
Bill O'Brien's going to help that offense.
I think so.
Maybe all 11 play up a little bit, but talent-wise, the Patriots haven't done well for themselves in recent history.
No, they haven't.
New York Jets, on the other hand, have drafted a lot of talent on that football team.
They have. So before drafting Ahmad Gardner last year, the last time they used a pick in the first 3 rounds on a cornerback was for Dexter McDougal in 2014. Corners are, we talk about offensive linemen all the time. You got to draft corners high on the regular. You can't just ignore corners for a decade. And they kind of did in the first 3 rounds. And I think this translates to the next ones with them. Over the last 6 years, the Jets' average draft pick is at 4.8 overall. So on average, over a 6-year stretch, the first selection is coming between the 4th and 5th pick overall. It's pretty terrible.
That is pretty terrible.
Yeah.
Moving on to the AFC North and the Baltimore Ravens, who have had a very consistent front office. Even though they did change GMs, it was a very in-house, very consistent coaching staff and front office over the course of the last decade.
So we know they're kind of the comp pick captains. They're the champs of the comp pick world, and they make a lot of draft picks. So over the past 10 drafts, they made 96 draft picks. I mean, that's 2 whole rosters basically over 10 draft selection. And they had 11 draft picks last year. Only one of those 11 came after the 4th round. So they're all like in comp pick land, 3rd rounders, 4th rounders, so you would think their roster should be a little bit better too. Like, I'm not giving Mel a hard time. I know he's a Raven guy, Mel Kiper, but they always get an A the day after the draft, but it doesn't always hold up,
Yeah. And it's I almost wonder, and we talked about this with the Bills too, and Lamar Jackson, and different teams that they get a quarterback and then they change the way they do things.
Mm-hmm.
Should teams not do that? Should teams just do what they do and not worry about if they're helping their quarterback or building the defense or, trying to fix one? Because when it comes to the NFL draft, it's like, okay, free agency for needs, draft the best players available. And I think some teams talk themselves into doing weird things because they want to replenish one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, draft the best guys, man. At the end of the day, just draft the best guys.
And the Ravens are kind of known for that they tend to get the best guys. At least it seems that way on draft day. But I mean, I just said they had 11 draft choices last year and only one of them was after the 4th round. None of them were wide receivers. Like, what were you doing there?
Right. And the thing that you need to help. So I don't know. Maybe it's the opposite for the Ravens. Maybe they need to do more of it.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right. Next, Cincinnati Bengals, Browns, Steelers in the North. We'll do the South and the West of the AFC. What are the recent draft trends of every team in the NFC? Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You don't have any more NFL football games for a while, but you can still bet on NFL football at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Future NFL Super Bowl champions, future NFL MVPs, draft props as well at FanDuel. And of course, it's the midway point of the NBA season. So now's the perfect time to download FanDuel because of the new customers will get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure. Love the website and the app. Super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line to point scores to threes drained in a game. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for the best chance at a bigger payout. One of my favorite things to do, and build your own parlays and same game parlays. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet to up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, guys, don't forget to subscribe to the brand new Peacock and Williamson YouTube page. We are no longer on the Locked On NFL YouTube page. Got our own standalone YouTube page. It doesn't change anything else for any of the other podcast apps, just YouTube. And if you haven't checked us out on YouTube, go check us out, youtube.com/@Peacock and Williamson, and subscribe. We are on to the Cincinnati Bengals, Matt.
Boy, do they have a trend.
Another team with a big-time quarterback. What are they doing recently around their quarterback in the draft?
They absolutely have a formula. And so in the last 12 drafts, their first 2 picks in all those drafts, that's 24 picks, since 2011, their first 2 picks of the drafts, 24 selections. 18 of those 24 have been on offensive players. I mean, that's a high percentage. So that leaves 6 picks that weren't on offensive players. All 6 of those were on defensive backs.
That's a bad recipe.
It's a crazy recipe. Yeah.
That's a bad recipe as far as look, and they've drafted some good players among
Chase
those picks,
and Higgins and Burrow.
And
right.
Themselves an offense and a passing game. But the defensive line is one of the most important things your team can have. And to not spend a pick in the first 2 selections on a defensive lineman is
they got him from outside the organization. They went out and got Hendrickson and Reeder and right. But that's a little crazy.
I was thinking, oh wait, what about
Hubbard was a third, and
Carl Lawson? He was a third too, right?
Yeah, he was a third, right?
Yeah. It's
crazy. The
Cleveland
Brownies. So hopefully for their sake, they have found their quarterback. I mean, everyone knows that jersey that has a million quarterback names hanging off the back of it. But still, 2012 wasn't that long ago. So since 2012, and I'm counting the Watson trade for this, they've used 5 first-round picks on quarterbacks. I mean, it's in a 10-year stretch. And that's not even counting the one they're giving up this year.
They might need to draft a backup, Matt. Might draft a backup. They're not going to do it in the first 2 rounds, but they still might have to draft a quarterback. And if you're wondering why the
first-round picks
as ridiculous as they did with the contract and the guarantees, I mean, that's why. No team needed a quarterback more than the Browns, and they were desperate.
Yep. I mean, we know that there's a revolving door there to no end since that organization has been there. But that goes to show. I mean, you've used 5 first-round picks in a 10-year stretch on quarterbacks.
Your Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, they have a couple strong ones here,
as close as anyone. What kind of trends have you noticed there?
So they drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round, but that's the first time they've used a first-round pick on an offensive player since drafting David DeCastro in 2012. And we talked about the stability of this organization. I mentioned I've seen 3 coaches in my lifetime. Well, Ben Roethlisberger being the other, Ben and Pickett are the only first-round quarterbacks since Mark Malone in 1980.
What's remarkable here is that David DeCastro was the last offensive player drafted in the first round by Pittsburgh until Kenny Pickett. Mm-hmm. He had an entire career and retired before they drafted another offensive player.
Right. Good career.
The Houston Texans. Let's move on to the AFC South draft trends.
So last year, they finally started to get picks, but I'm sure Texans fans don't forget that before that, they had a really long stretch of not having premium picks. So before last year, the 4 drafts before that, the earliest pick they made was 23rd overall. And during that 4-year stretch, their average starting draft slot was all the way at 49.5. You wonder why their roster is a disaster. I mean, you picked late for 4 years in a row. And then they had another cornerback trend that got broken by taking Stingley. Was they hadn't drafted a corner since 2015 in the first round. So in the top 4 rounds, I'm sorry, kind of like the Jets. So they went no corners in the top 4 rounds since 2015 before taking Stingley last year.
For a lot of franchises, fans are out there probably hearing these trends and thinking, man, thank God we've got new leadership. And
right.
Casario's been there for a little while now, but he wasn't there in 2015. And they drafted Stingley last year, and they've got multiple picks now, and they've got a new head coach in a new direction. And you hope for the Texans, it's like, okay, these draft ditties are going to start to look a lot different in a couple of years than they do right now.
I guarantee they will, because I bet my ditty next year is over the last 2 years, they've made 25 picks and 4 first rounders. You know what I mean? After going 4 years with nothing in the draft.
Indianapolis Colts draft trends. And this has been an odd team with odd drafters. And they had a franchise quarterback, and they had a generational quarterback in Andrew Luck. And then he disappeared, and they didn't build an offensive line around him. Then they had one of the best offensive lines in the league. And then that line wasn't playing that great last year. It's just a really wild organization that's now looking for their post Andrew Luck quarterback still.
Yeah. And over the last 5 drafts, they've only had 2 first-round picks in that stint, but 11 second-rounders.
Wait, say that again?
Over the last 5 drafts, they've only made 2 first-round picks, but 11 second-round picks.
What am I missing? Where did those first-rounders go?
Trying to think of the trade. I know they traded down several times. They were accumulating second-round picks like crazy there for a while. I'd have to think, what were the deals they made to get out of the first? Because they didn't. Well, they gave 1 to your Niners for Buckner.
Okay, Buckner. That's 2020.
Yeah. I'm going to draft history right now as we speak here, because I'm making sure that my facts are right, to be honest with you.
I'm trying to figure out what they have.
Kwity Paye was a first-round pick.
Yes.
Quentin Nelson was a first-round pick, and that's it. I mean, and I'm not counting Nelson. So Alec Pierce was their first pick last year. Kwity Paye was a first-rounder the year before. Pittman in 2020.
Yeah,
Rocky
high second-rounder.
Yeah. So,
and then Jonathan Taylor was a high second-rounder as well.
Yep. And so Nelson was a 1 and Paye was a 1. Tons of 2s in there, though.
Interesting.
11 second-round picks.
The Colts fans, let us know where those. I can't even think of where those first-round picks went. Did they just trade out of the first?
I think there was some draft day trades, just accumulating future capital, and Buckner's one of them, obviously.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Next, we've got Jacksonville Jaguars, Titans in the South, and then the AFC West draft trends. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Now it's your turn to compete with some of the other listeners and hosts around the Locked On NFL network and all over the world. We've created a Locked On League for you to compete against Locked On fans. And can you be the ultimate Locked On Football GM? Choose the Locked On, one word, Locked On League in the app to join. Can you create a football dynasty and hire the right coaches and coordinators, trade players, navigate your franchise through free agency and the draft, all the ups and downs of a season? If you've ever dreamed of being an NFL GM, this is definitely the mobile game for you. Ultimate Football GM. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, AFC South. Next up is the Jacksonville Jaguars. What kind of trends are we seeing in Jacksonville in the draft?
A long stint of being really bad is what, and hopefully that's changing with Lawrence now. And kind of like we talked about Houston, a changing of culture there. But in the last 11 drafts, their average starting spot has been 6.3 overall. That's a long time to be picking right around the 6th pick. And if you remember in 2018, they were coming off a good year. They went to the AFC Championship game. They picked 29th overall. So if you take that one out, the remaining 10 drafts over that period, their average starting draft spot is 4th overall. That's hideous.
That's remarkable. That is unbelievable.
Really bad, right?
They've made some good picks.
Oh yeah,
They
Ramsey
made some bad picks too, though, with some of those. And if you're seeing a team that's drafting consistently in the top 5, it's because they made some bad draft picks and some bad organizational choices. But hey, I think they're over that now, right?
I do too.
Not your quarterback. The last time they weren't drafting number 1 overall was 2020, right? And so the Jaguars are in a much better place right now, and hopefully drafting in the 20s for the foreseeable future. Who knows, maybe even in the 30s sometime soon. Tennessee Titans draft trends.
This one's not great, I'll be honest. Sometimes you got to strain a little bit, but of their last 12 first-round picks, only 3 have been on defensive players. And remember, we were talking yesterday, or Friday, I guess it was, their offense is pretty devoid of talent. I mean, 9 of their last 12 first-round picks were on offense. You would think that would be better on that side of the ball. And then there is some balance, though. But over the last 7 years, when you look at their first 2 picks, they've been offense, defense, defense, offense. They've been equal except for 1 year. So they've made up for it a little bit with the other picks. But of your last 12 picks, you would think that, the defense would be terrible and the offense would be great. And that's not what we're seeing.
And then they hit on they hit on a second rounder in A.J. Brown, got a first rounder back, but they lost a really good player too.
Exactly.
AFC West, Denver Broncos. And Russell Wilson, interesting football team here. There's no more stuff about Russell Wilson. There's a rumor that he had his own office and office hours. I think that rumor was debunked. The circus around Russell Wilson, I'm almost over it at this point. And even as weird as Russell Wilson is, and he tried to act perfect, and he's brought a lot of this upon himself, Matt. I almost feel bad for the guy, and I almost am rooting for him to at least play well enough that the storylines go away.
Yeah, I kind of am too. He was kind of easy to dislike, and now it's kind of gone too far.
Right.
But speaking of him, we know that Denver gave up a ton to get Russell Wilson last year, correct? But including that trade, they've made 29 draft picks over the past 3 years, including 6 third-round picks. So the infrastructure of that team might be better than people realize. I mean, you bring in 6 third-rounders over a 3-year stretch and 29 total picks over that stint, including Russell Wilson. It's a pretty good haul.
Kansas City Chiefs. Have you noticed a big switch in the Kansas City Chiefs there, them drafting post basically getting a superstar quarterback and previously?
Yeah, and certainly the Tyreek trade holds up here as well. This was another one I had to strain a little bit for, but they've made 7 second-round picks in the last 4 drafts, and I'm almost certain they still have Miami's from the Tyreek trade, and then should have another 2. So there's a couple of these teams, the Colts, the Chiefs, that have had a lot of second-round selections. And that's a quality pick.
Absolutely. You're building the bulk of your team and the bulk of your starters on your team. You should be at least on day 2 in those second and third round picks. So hitting on a nice number of those and having some extra ones is absolutely helpful, even though everyone's paid attention to what you did with your first round picks.
The Raiders are sort of similar in that in the last 5 years, they've made 8 third-round picks and 8 fourth-round picks. Like, those are gifts. I mean, they should be at minimum great backups or okay starter or key special teamer, and they've drafted really poorly. I mean, the Gruden-Mayock era was brutal for this team.
It's amazing how bad and how much worse it continues to look. They almost have nothing to show for years and years of draft picks.
Right. I mean, trading Khalil Mack and Amari Cooper for first-round picks and Henry Ruggs and the corner Conley out of Ohio State and dudes that aren't even in the league.
Not even on a roster, let alone their own roster.
Right. Yeah. And so it's been bad. Last one here.
Chargers. Yeah.
Yeah. The AFC West might be the most boring one, but I did what I could. Since 2010, they've made 14 first-round picks. 7 on offense, 7 on defense. That's something. Little balance.
And let us know. I want to hear from Chargers, Raiders, Chiefs, Broncos, AFC West, all the AFC teams out there and NFC teams. We'll get to those tomorrow for the NFC draft Dittys from Matt Williamson. But let us know, guys, at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Get involved in the mailbag as well. But let us know what draft trends you've noticed for your specific football teams, and it's always fun to hear. And I love draft season, so every angle of draft season, of course, we'll have covered here for you every single day on Peacock and Williamson. Get those mailbag questions in. Make sure you are subscribed up to the Peacock and Williamson brand new YouTube channel, youtube.com/@Peacock and Williamson. And we'll be back with you tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.